Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Spiritual Sisters podcast. This is the most you're going to hear from me today because I have not much to contribute. So, hello.
I find that hard to believe.
You know me.
Do you care to share why, Nicole? Or should we share that later?
I'll share it later. Introduce yourself and our guest.
Hi, everyone. Gabrielle Celeste here, and this one is for all of our animal lovers. We're going to be talking about animal communication today with my dear friend, Felicity Davies. Felicity is a horsemanship, mindset, intuition, and business mentor, the host of the Equestrian Perspective podcast, and overall, and she's an author, guys. She's an author. Can't wait to talk about that. And a horse lover from Australia. Felicity has created life-changing results, you guys, for over 1,000 horse and human combinations and just partnerships around the world. Her specialty involves empowering equestrians to get unstuck and form incredible relationships with themselves and their soul horses from a physical, emotional, and spiritual lens. Felicity loves creating transformative experiences for people by weaving together her background in horsemanship coaching, human design, EFT tapping, NLP, animal communication, intuitive healing, and the Lazaris Nerve Compression Release and overall business. So, Felicity, welcome. We're so excited to have you. I feel like this has been some time in the making, and I know we've connected. I've been a guest on your podcast, but it's just nice to finally have you on the show and link up. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am really happy to be here, and I'm excited to share more about animal communication from the lens that I really, what was I going to say? I feel like a lot of people have different perspectives on animal communication, and the way that I tend to work with animals is in this deeply healing way where they're really guiding me to deeper healing work for their people. So I'm excited to weave more of that lens into it so people can learn more about what their animals are mirroring back to them and how they can get to the root cause of some of the things that might be surfacing.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I know you've helped me with my dog that just passed, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get into it, we like to ask our guests a series of 5 questions, and I'm going to pass that on to Nicole since she's not doing much talking in this episode. Because
I did the intro. I said that was all I was contributing. Okay,
we can make an exception.
Felicity, what are your big 3?
I'm a Virgo sun, Gemini moon, and Capricorn rising.
Okay. Does that track, Gabs?
Totally.
Okay. Totally. And what is your human design?
I'm a manifesting generator 5-1 profile with emotional authority.
Okay. I was just telling Gabs that we seem to have a lot of Manny Gens. More so, if we were taking a poll, I think we would be winning the Manny Gens.
You know what I noticed? A lot of podcast hosts are like Manny Gens projectors, like one of the two, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of Manny Gens, like, I feel like you have the entrepreneur soul in you. It's like, let me chop and change as much as I fucking want because I do not want to be sticking to the one thing, please.
Yeah. It's a problem. It's a real problem. Okay. And if you could work with anyone, and it sounds like you do everything, like she was rattling off your resume, and I'm like, is there anything she doesn't do? So if you could work with anybody doing any one of the things that she just mentioned, either living or no longer living, who would you want to work with, and in what capacity, because you do so much?
Ooh. And I know that you asked these questions, so I probably should have thought about this because I feel like I'm in a space where I have pulled back so much from working with other people that I don't really have a desire to really not learn from anyone, but I don't really have that desire at the moment. Like, it's not a front of mind thing of me being like, oh, I definitely want to connect with that person. And it sounds really weird to say because I'm sure there would be somebody, but at the spot that I'm in right now, I'm just like, no, leave me in my bubble.
Oh my goodness.
How would you feel about working with Queen Elizabeth and her horses back in the day?
Probably not very interested.
No, I'm just really into the crown lately, and she was very into her horses. So I was like, oh my gosh.
There's a lot of people into horses, but they still like aren't. I mean, it's probably a bit different back then because horses were generally used for a specific purpose and a job in that regard. So they had to be kind of pushed through certain things. But there are a lot of people that have worked with horses and still do to this day that don't really treat the horse like a horse. They treat it like an object. And I'm like, yeah, it could be cool. But also there's this element of like, how can you not see what you're doing in front of you there? So I'm sure there is somebody. At the moment, my brain's like, no, you've cut that. You've closed that chapter for now.
Okay,
we'll
hold on.
reopen soon.
I have 3 horse people in mind, so just pick one of the 3, okay? And doesn't mean you like them, but just they're like the best option out of the 3, the less of the evils. Okay. So Queen Elizabeth and her horses. I don't remember what her horses' names were. Lisa Vanderpump and her horses, or Kylie Jenner. No, not Kylie. What's her other name? Kendall Jenner and her horses.
You're not giving me much.
That's why I said lesser of the evils. Which of those 3 is like, oh, if I have to?
I probably would go Queen Elizabeth. At least you've got some depth there.
Yeah, Lisa Vanderpump. She's pretty interesting. She's I
don't know who she is. Who is she?
You don't know who she is? Oh, we'll talk after.
Can I Google her?
Yeah, she's from Vanderpump Rules, but she's English, I think, or British, and she is.
Oh yeah, don't know her though.
Yeah, she's a very fascinating lady. Okay, and then let's see, what are some of the podcasts, or I've been kind of throwing in there like audiobooks or documentaries, just kind of anything that you're interested in now, because as a Manny Jen, we like to listen to and watch and do a lot of the things. So what are some of your interests right now?
So at the moment I'm re-listening to Rick Rubin's book on audio, The Creative Actor Way of Being. So fucking good. Especially just from a Manny Jen perspective, like his permission slips to just create for you. The audience comes last. Love this. What else? I got back into the Sophia Code, which is interesting because I picked that up when I went through Soul Teacher with Gabrielle, which is how I met Gabrielle. And I started the Sophia Code, didn't really make it past the first chapter, and I was listening to it in audio when I was in the car, and I'm like, okay. And then I picked back up and I got through the first chapter all about Isis. And shit, man, that's like an hour long like key code transmission healings at the end of that. So that was really cool. That's kind of what I'm playing with at the moment in terms of podcasts. It's super interesting. I'll just pick a podcast randomly here and there. I'm into the Gene Keys at the moment, and often I'll listen to a podcast that Richard Rudd's been on. But I was contemplating on this yesterday with a group of clients of mine, because I used to be someone who would listen to everything on double speed and fill in like every possible gap in my life with audio or something. And this year I've really been pulling back, and it's interesting because through my journey with the Gene Keys, my purpose sphere in the Gene Key is moving from the shadow of impatience to patience to timelessness. And I've been going on this journey with a friend of mine where we've been contemplating each sphere for a month. And sitting with contemplating, like it's a whole fucking activation in itself, and sitting with really looking at where I was being impatient and how I can invite more patience into my life has been very illuminating. And I recognized that through that, I was filling up all of my space to avoid feeling, as many of us do. And I've really been welcoming in the slowing down life and the listening to things on one speed, normal speed. So at the moment, my podcast array is limited because I'm just, once again, being.
Gabby jumped on, and I think she was listening to a podcast at like 2 times speed, and I was just like, this is like overwhelming. I can't listen to this. I have to listen. I was doing 1.5 for a little bit, and then There's one podcast in particular that their theme music, when it was on the 1.5, it was really overwhelming for me. So I dropped it back down to 1.25, and that's kind of where I stick. But even so, in the last couple weeks, I haven't been filling up my time with podcasts or audiobooks because I find that I'm getting really like overstimulated by just noise, which is really interesting for me because I love noise all the time. So
I wonder if that's the shadow side of being a Manny Gen for you both, you know, because you guys are both Manny Gens.
I found I was, and I've really been, especially with this manifestation that's come through recently for me, really been looking at where my ego was driving a lot of my decisions and what I thought I should do, particularly with business and things like that, because ever since I started my business, I got addicted to learning more about business and being in all the programs and doing all of the things. And I was in this membership last year, went for a whole year, and there would be a new live program each month. There was probably about like at least 12 hours of video to consume each month from one person. And me being very like, Virgo, must listen to everything as it's released. I'm like, what the fuck do I believe? You know, I feel like I lost my voice a little bit because I was contorting myself into these other belief systems or other ways of viewing life that weren't really mine. So now I've been really, really pulling that back. And same goes with this manifestation that's come through, which is something that I've been really like manifesting for a long fucking time, which is our property, which is super exciting. And I've had this complete 180 shift in regards to how I'm viewing money and how I'm viewing my business. And yeah, I just recognized where I kind of got in this spot where it was like chasing more or chasing these other things that I thought I should. When in the beginning, I was so happy in the beginning. Like I was really enjoying working with the clients that I had at the price points I had and doing these things. But then it became this journey of, oh, how can I grow? How can I scale? How can I help more people? I'm going to save the world. Like, and now I'm at the spot where I'm like, I kind of like it being quite manageable. And yes, it's still successful, but let's just live life, you know?
I know we still have another couple questions to get to, but I was thinking, and this is what I wanted to say is like, we could do a total podcast episode completely separate from this one on just business. And I had said in a couple, I said it a couple like 20 plus episodes back. I'm like, I don't know anyone that had a great 2020. And then you hit me up over WhatsApp because our girl's in Australia over here. And she was like, I had a great 2020, Gavin. I was like, you are an exception to the rule, my dear, because, you know, that's when you started your business and everything really started to flourish. But yes, go ahead, Nicole.
Okay. Last question. If you could go to any concert, any artist, living or no longer living, who would it be?
I'd go see T Swift. Has to be.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though, because yes, however, I've pulled back once again through my through my intentional energy, whatever I want to call it. And I'm curious to know how you guys feel about this, because I heard on an episode of, I think it was a metaphysical, what's it called? Metaphysical, let me find it now because that's going to bug me. Metaphysical Gravity podcast. She was talking with this guy and he was mentioning about how a lot of, I think it's more businesses, how they really loop people into their system. They're soul sucking because they're keeping people stuck in a certain system in a certain way. And then I got thinking about that with music. And I'm like, when lyrics get really embedded in your head or stuck in your head, or when you get really obsessed with a lyric, is that soul sucking? Because that's what my lovely T Swift was doing to me. And I love her. She's amazing. But I found myself, and I don't know if this is the Virgo, Gemini, probably fucking everything in me, but I was like, let me tease apart all of the lyrics. Let me understand what this means. Let me look at the deeper. And I'm like, I just need to stop. Like it was another way to fill my head with another thing. So I've had a bit of a break. But I would still go to see her. Absolutely.
I'm not a Taylor Swift fan. However, I'm becoming more interested in her ever since she started dating Travis Kelce because I think he's hot and I'm shallow. And that's all I have for today, guys. Thank you for playing our game.
So Nicole, you're supposed to share why you're not speaking mostly moving forward on this podcast.
Hey,
and what
you guys don't
about.
come for me. Nobody come for me. I don't want to hear anybody giving me a hard time about this, but I am not an animal person. I'm not a pet person. I'm allergic to cats. I would be okay if I never owned a dog in my life. I don't want hamsters, rabbits. I don't want any kind of pet in my house. And I don't know why I've just never had a connection to animals. Like I would be okay never having any. And I'm just not a pet person. I don't know why that gene didn't make it to me. Maybe because I didn't grow up with them. So don't come for me, anybody.
And we were talking about animal communication today.
Well, I think with anything, like a lot of this, you can just sub out, not with everything, but in terms of the mirroring component, you just sub out, like if you were ever to read any of my content or social media, sub out horse or animal for business, partner, child, same kind of goes, but obviously different. Anyway, sorry, Gabby.
And I don't like dog hair.
Yeah. True. So I know that a large part of our audience really just love animals, and I have a couple questions that are just geared towards like maybe how, the relationship with an animal that in this case would belong to you. How would you say as an animal communicator that your relationship with an animal deepens your spiritual relationship with the universe, God, source, higher power? And also, I know this is a two-parted question, but maybe we could start with, how did you discover your ability to communicate with animals and just connect to the other side?
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the second part, and then we can swing back to the first part. So in terms of diving into animal communication, that was something that I was always deeply curious about, and also diving further down my spiritual path and diving more into personal development and all of that, that led me to start my business. And then I started predominantly focusing on more of the physical components, working with my clients, so helping their horses in person, like overcoming behavioral problems, things like that. But as I transitioned my business online, I noticed that whilst I was doing that, I was still attracting people that were deeply spiritual. And I ended up with quite a few clients that could communicate with animals, or called themselves animal communicators, or called themselves or were shamans, doing this really deep spiritual work. And as I was weaving in all of the NLP and the other modalities that I use, like I was guiding them on some pretty deep healing journeys as well. So I was already playing around with the non-physical components in terms of the energetic work. And I was really, really curious, but I didn't believe that I could communicate with animals because my clairvoyance at the time wasn't strong at all. Like if I was to close my eyes and you were to guide me through a forest meditation, I don't see the forest. It's black, but I just know I'm in the forest, right? But at the time I thought, no, you have to see the forest. And me, probably the Virgo in me is very literal and like, no, you must do things in the exact way that whatever you perceive. Anyway. And then I ended up, one of my clients was hosting, what happened was one of my best friends, she guided me through this ancestral memory activation session. And through that activation session, she was telling me about how I had so many past lives as this animal communicator, and I was with animals in so many of these past lives. And I was like, oh, fascinating. Like I've always had this strong connection with animals, but yeah, still not quite believing that I could communicate with animals in the way that I thought people did. Anyway, and then one of my clients was hosting this animal communication class. So I decided to do the class, and we did a group practice communicating with a few different animals, and I was getting these messages coming through just from that knowing state, just writing things down and having a lot of things validated. And then I started practicing with my clients, and they were validating everything that I was sharing with them, even when I didn't know their animals at all, like we just started working together. And then that led me into Soul Teacher and just diving down that journey. And then that opened me up even more. So I think through my experience personally with animal communication, I had this remembering that I have been doing it for a long time. I just didn't realize I was doing it. So I think a lot of people, especially if you are deeply connected to animals, you likely are a really powerful animal communicator. You're probably already doing it. You just don't realize you are. And obviously there are ways that you can deepen your practice as well, and you can deepen the messages. So that's kind of how that unfolded. And it was more of a, oh, I can do this moment, not like a working really hard at it, which is for my Virgo brain, like, what? So that's the first part. Do you have anything you want to speak into about that, or?
No, continue, please.
Okay. So then moving on to the first part of your question, what was that again? Now I've forgotten.
How your relationship with an animal that like belongs to you, I would say, can strengthen or build your relationship to a higher power. It's almost like they're a conduit or a medium of sorts.
Totally. So I like to see animals as one of our spiritual guides in our lives. Like, I think they are one of the most powerful spiritual guides, and I think it depends on the animal that you have. Now, most of my work has been connecting with horses. However, I've connected with some dogs. I haven't connected with that many different sorts of animals because my work predominantly focuses on horses, and that's where I'm drawn to. But from the horse perspective, like, holy shit, guys. Like, the mirroring that happens with your horse and the initiations that they guide you through and everything that unfolds is just wild. And even I was really reflecting on this in terms of, and anybody could do this with the animals in their life, like, just look at the patterns and what you've been going through with your animals, and perhaps the physical ailments that they have, and when they have the physical ailment, like, what's been surfacing in your life when they're going through that. Because often our animals will take on a lot for us. I think particularly dogs and cats, because they're like really powerful energy, like cleansers, and they're really good at taking on stuff for their people. I feel like horses are a little bit more, yes, they do the same thing, but they also mirror it back even more clearly. So if you just look at your cycles with different animals in your life and what you've been going through and when things have surfaced with you and with them and what's been happening, I think it just allows for this deeper connection. So, for example, my first pony, her name's Muffy, and going through that journey with her, so I got her when I was 12, and she's just really cute Welsh Mountain pony, grey, like absolute sweetheart. So, yeah, just such an angel. And through that point in my life while I had Muffy, I was in that real like adolescent stage, like still figuring life out, like learning so much with her. And she really mirrored back to me, I guess, the early stages of me really falling into, it's interesting because I'm still contemplating all of these pieces because this has popped up recently for me. But with Muffy, she had the archetype of her was this real like good girl characteristic. Although she still had this like sass and this spice to her, but she was just absolute angel, absolute sweetheart. And I think me through that stage as well, I really embodied that energy. But I was also, as I journeyed further along with Muffy, I got into this position where I was more interested in competing because that's what I thought I should do. And the external validation piece started to roll into it. And interesting contemplating that journey with my horses since then, like it's been all of these, any hiccups that I've had with them along the road. For example, oh my God, I'm going all over the place here because this is still forming in my head. But for example, with Muffy, so I had her for 3 years. She was in her 20s and then she ended up passing in this really like tragic accident. And, I think that was really to support me even more powerfully in the non-physical. Well, that was to support me even more powerfully in the non-physical. Then the next horse I got, it was interesting because he has so much energy, and I still have him to this day. He's got so much energy. He's really, how would I describe him? He's got a lot of energy. He's an ex-racehorse. And what was surfacing with him on my journey with him was me trying to learn how to control him. So with the way that I was working with horses at that point in time, it was like, let's control this energy. Let's get him tired. Let's make sure he's doing what I want him to do. Let's go to these competitions. Let's get this done. And I didn't really understand him. And he had this personality at the time of being quite, like, I would describe him as a horse that only a mother could love kind of thing, because he's just a little bit like snobby, a bit standoffish, but I was just like, oh, he's my everything, right? And I just thought that that's the way that he was. I just thought he is the way that he is. And then a few years into our journey together, we were preparing for this really big competition, and I kept him at a friend's house overnight because I was doing these lessons on a Saturday and a Sunday, I think it was, and he ended up rolling in a fence and having this really big leg injury, right? Where he cut the tendon at the front of the leg, wrapped around, lacerated the tendon at the back of the leg, like really big injury. And we didn't know if he was going to make it. He ended up getting through surgery, all of these things. But it's interesting, and I'll peel this back a little bit, otherwise I'm going to be spending the whole podcast talking about my horses and what we've journeyed through together. But when I look back at that now, I feel like that was a huge warning sign as well from him to be like, wake the fuck up. You're doing something that you don't actually enjoy. What are you doing? Because there was continual repeated things like this over and over again over different spans to wake me up. And often I will connect with clients' horses, and this isn't every time, but if they go through something big, and particularly if it's repeated, the horse will be saying, pay attention to what's going on in your life. Like, I'm doing this for you. Like, what's going on for you? Like, look outside, right? So I didn't quite learn that lesson the first time that happened. And then it was interesting witnessing all of these other ripple effects. So I guess to put this in a nutshell, because as I mentioned, I'm going to be spending a long time talking about my horses if I keep going like this, but they're such powerful guides in our lives. And just seriously take a moment, zoom out, look at the personality traits that your animal has, look at what's surfacing in your relationship and when difficult things surface in your relationship and what's going on. They are such powerful mirrors and guides, and they're really here to support us like on our journey. And I think so often people can get in the mentality of like, oh, especially if the animal is going through something, I'm here to help my animal, I'm doing everything for my animal. It's like, no, they are here to help you. Like, they've got way more stuff going on to support you in so many different realms and in so many different ways. Like, really look at what's surfacing and let that guide you forward. And even, oh my God, I can keep talking about this. A friend of mine, she's got a daughter, and her daughter's navigating some stuff with her horse in relation to he has this separation anxiety when he gets taken away from the other horses. And this is really mirroring for her daughter what's surfacing in her and where she wants to grip and control and where she experiences anxiety. And so she has to, with this particular horse, journey through that with him to help him, because likely what will happen is if she decided to part ways with this horse, the next horse will likely present the same thing again. It's the same thing with like romantic relationships. You just keep hitting the same kind of lessons until you're like, oh, wait, it's this. So they're amazing.
There's so much there. I really wanted to just comment on what you were speaking to about like them being reflectors, much like in human design for us. And I was
did you know that animals in human design, like, what's the percentage? It's like 70% are reflectors.
No, I didn't. That's wild. That's so rare because reflectors are the most rare.
Yeah, so animals are 70% reflectors, and they have a different human design chart. So they don't have a solar plexus, and they don't have the ajna or the crown.
Oh man, you need to like completely see another episode about human design and business, and then Gene Keys.
I haven't dived into that completely yet. The first line in my human design profile was like, "Give me a bit more time." But yeah, when I heard that, I was like, "Makes so much fucking sense."
Yeah, it really does, because reflectors literally do that. They take on and then they like mirror back to you. And I think that actually there's so much truth to that, because something that I was really appreciative of you. You reached out when our family dog recently passed, and you had connected with him prior to his passing a couple of years ago when we initially met. And then when this recently happened, and it was really just kind of speaking to like the transitions that a lot of us within the family are experiencing. You know, I'm relocating. Nicole is going through IVF. Brianna is going through her own thing. And then it's just like really interesting how, and this is like getting a little bit off a tangent, but I've had enough psychic readings to confirm that like my family and me, like we've done so many lifetimes together, and this is not the first go around together by any means. And like right now, because we're in the collective in general, we're kind of in this space where we're going through, it's kind of like getting ready for your new reality. And that new reality starts in 2025. And like, there's so many shifts that are happening right now in 2024 to set you up for that. And that's why it's just a weird fucking year. So anyways, you know, he had passed, and he had, you know, he was a Great Dane, and he was like 8 or 9, and that breed doesn't live very long. But it's so interesting because something that I've found and observed, and this had happened when Nicole gave birth to my godson, animals transition before a baby comes in, and there has to be some type of like, you know, connection to maybe them, you know, securing the safe passage of that new life. And it's almost like a sacrifice that, you know, they pass on so they can ensure that safe transition going through the birthing portal. And I really believe that. And another thing that I'd like, I mean, you kind of spoke to thematically in your comment, it's like animals they take on a lot, and it makes sense that they're reflectors. And it's so interesting because like I'm totally getting a cat. Nicole, I know you're allergic. I'm so sorry. But they protect you. They protect the energy. So like in your space. So sometimes you'll see animals just like stare off and bark into the distance, or like meow, or like get really fierce and protective, is because they're seeing other dimensional things that we can't see, you know? So I feel like, I would really love to get into, because I know you had spoken, you started off the podcast with speaking to how you think it should look like in terms of connecting with an animal. So like, what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions that one might have about animal communication? And can you please also walk us through the process of how you connect? Because I know I want to say you specialize, I know you do a lot of different things, but you really specialize in healings.
Yeah. So, oh my God, why is my brain
so much, right? Because you're Virgo. we love our Virgos. It's just what we
I'm like, okay, so wait, the question was walking through the animal communication process. Yes, misconceptions. Yes, perfect. I was thinking about a comment to make in the cat thing though, because often my clients that have cats during sessions where we're doing deeper healing work, the cat will often be much more present in the session, even sitting on their lap. Or in one of my clients, her cat would always sit on the top of the chair and just like be there to support during the session. It's super cool.
Can I just say something?
Wait, Nicole's I have a question too.
No. Side note, let me make this observation. People, if you're watching on YouTube, Nicole's muted right now, but the facial expressions
I know, I saw
because I'm so allergic. Like I'm so allergic to cats. I had a client recently who has cats at home, and I didn't know she had cats, and she came into session. It was like my first session with her, and I have a little office, and I was like sneezing, and my eyes got all watery, and I was like, oh my gosh, like it was so weird. And then she mentioned later something about her cats, and I was like, oh, like I'm literally just I'm so allergic. I had an allergy test, and that was the only thing that I reacted to, and I reacted so strongly. Like I'll break out in hives, like it's a mess. I have noticed, and I want you to get to Gabby's question, but just kind of like a yes or no. So I don't know if cats know that I hate them, because anytime I'm around them, they just seem to like want to come and like rub themselves on me and like get all up in my space, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like get away from me. You're so like I'm gonna die. I'm so allergic to you guys. Do they know? And because cats are kind of bitchy, they're like very passive aggressive. Do they do that on purpose because they like know that I don't like them?
I haven't specifically asked them, but I would imagine it's that unattached energy. You've got this unattached energy of excuse me, morning voice. You got this unattached energy, and because of that, it's like, rather than like, maybe you're also thinking about like, go away from me, stay away from me, and that's
it almost
or don't come near me.
Yeah, because they're so mercurial, It's like, oh, you don't want anything to do with me? I'm gonna get even closer to you.
Totally. And like,
I think
you need me. I'll have to ask it would be interesting to connect with a cat. I'm sure they would have all different responses though. Depends on the cat.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I'm like, gosh, I wouldn't have to work so hard in my sleep state to protect. And in general, like they'll just protect the area. And I'm like, okay, it takes the energy off of me. Side note, and we'll get to the misconception question. I was talking to Michelle. I don't think I'm not sure if you two are familiar with one another, but I should introduce you to. She's been on the show a couple of times, and she specializes in a lot of things, but like she has been on to talk about aliens. But she was telling me because her house is like so surrounded by just like vortexes and portals and stuff, that she got a cat so she didn't have to work as hard energetically speaking. And I was like, that makes so much sense. So anyways, please proceed. Sorry. Just wanted to make that comment.
No, I love it. The cat's the divine feminine thing as well. Like, why did Cleopatra have a black cat? You know? Okay, misconceptions with animal communication. So I think it really depends on the person, but I think a lot of people, this is where it can get a bit murky. Animal communication, it's sort of like if you were to practice mediumship, right? And you're connecting with a loved one that you were really close with, right? I think when you're connecting with somebody that you're really, really close with, your ego can get in the way and you can doubt the communication and the connection. You can think that you're making it up. So same goes with animal communication. When you intentionally decide to connect, you might receive messages, or you might already be receiving messages and you disregard them because you think that you're just making it up, right? But with connections that can come through in so many different ways, like with connecting with past loved ones, you could receive messages in the form of angel numbers or music or whatever. With our animals, you are communicating with them when you look at them and you're like, oh, they don't want to do that today. Like, how is that not any different to the deeper communication, right? So I think we're doing this all of the time, where we tune in and we can really feel into the animal and their personality and what's coming up for them. And obviously you want to make the distinction that it's not just a projection of yours and you're just not like, you're assuming what you think that they want or that they want to do. You're really connecting on that deep, pure level. So that's more of the day-to-day life where you're connecting with your animal and you're really receiving these messages from them and you're really having this two-way conversation just as a part of your partnership and your relationship. So that's one thing. So I think misconceptions would be that animal communication has to be done in a certain specific way. So for me, with the experiences that I had with clients that connected with animals, it seems like they were very intuitive as a child and they saw really clear visuals, either movies playing out that the animals would send them or pictures coming through. And that was something that I didn't connect with or resonate with either statement. I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to be able to do that because I don't see pictures and movies that clearly, and I don't recall being super connected to my intuition or having these big psychic experiences as a child. And then the other thing was, from my experience, the communicators that I knew of in terms of how they set up their practice, it seems like it would take them a long time to really soak into that space where they could connect. Like they're really making it a real ceremonial process where they're setting everything up and they're really, it's like a real sacred process to invite the animal in and receive the messages. And so that's the kind of misconceptions that I had in that beginning. Another thing as well is I think with animal communication, often people think that you can just tell the animals what you want them to do and they will just do it. So let's just say if you had a horse and they were doing this specific behavior and the owner would say, like, can you tell them to not do that? Well, no. Like, you can speak to them about it. You can ask why they're doing it. You can see what's surfacing and then you can go from there. For example, a client of mine, her horse was chewing these fence posts and they hadn't chewed the fence posts before. Like it was only for a short period of time. Both her horse and I think the horse she was paddocked with was chewing the top of these fence posts. And she was like, I wonder why she's doing that. Like what's going on? We've tried to adjust her feed to make sure she's not like lacking in any minerals or anything. And then this was as a part of one of my group programs, everybody connected with her. But one of the messages I received was something to do with water, right? And now I'm pretty sure from memory, the trough was leaking. The water trough was leaking near those posts. So the posts were sucking up all of this water. It was really hot at that point in time. So they were chewing the posts because it was another self-soothing source of water, right? So once they addressed the water situation and gave the horses electrolytes, they stopped chewing the posts. Okay. So rather than me just being like, stop chewing the posts, no, every behavior has a function. Everything that happens has a function. It's looking deeper and looking at, okay, what's this telling you? What message are they trying to send? So I think with animal communication, often people think it's like, oh, it's a quick way to just tell them what I want them to do and then they'll stop doing it. And it's like, yeah, no, you have to listen to them.
Felicity, I have a question that's unrelated to animals, but just out of curiosity, what is your strongest clair? Because you mentioned that your claircognizance wasn't very strong. You weren't seeing things. So what is it for you?
My inner knowing. What's that? Oh my God, I teach this and I'm just having Claircognizance. So clairvoyance isn't my strongest, although it's getting stronger. And claircognizance is my strongest. And I would say clairsentience as well, the feeling.
Yeah. Like Nicole.
Is that a mini gen thing? Like just the mini gens are feelers and knowers?
Not always, because Lindsay's a mani gen and she's a seer. Shout out, Lindsay. It's so interesting too. Something kind of unrelated, or like a comment. Something that I've noticed that animals do, because it's not my area of expertise by any means in intuitive readings, although it does come through at times, is that animals, both living and on the other side, will often have intuitive messages. And I've had, I don't think it was Zeus was recently passed. It might have been Domino, which was like that when he passed. That was the family dog. I like can cry on command when I think of him dying, and when I think of my dad eventually passing, like I could die. But when he passed, that was the most recent dance / shift that everyone in the family went through, because it was just kind of like chaos unfolded. But he had shared, he's now with our uncle that had passed right after we finished our training. And my uncle Bobby was with the dogs, and Domino was one of them on the other side. And they were like, get really excited because like, I know you're sad about me passing and our passings, but there's a lot of babies coming to the family. So like you guys have that to look forward to. So I think it's so profound that like animals can also share intuitive messages, whether or not they're still with us or on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well, often we can look at our relationship with animals as like, oh, they've always been an animal. Like I did a session with a client recently, and she has such a strong soul connection with her horse, and her horse was her daughter in a past life.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Okay, have you come across, because I had this conversation with Chelsea with her dog. Shout out Chelsea. Shout out to all our girls. Her dog Tux, she said that they were married in a past life.
It does not surprise me. And it's interesting, I was having a conversation with Chelsea the other day because she put up a thing on her stories about her dog, Tux, being really upset with the fireworks. And I was just like, oh, poor guy. And then she was just contemplating like, oh, how do the horses go? Like, why do you think this happens? And I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the animals that get worried about firework noises were in the war in a past life.
Right.
It's like gunshot noises.
Yeah.
So I'm just there's so many different things that can come through. They could be different animals, they could be people, they could be your parent, they could be your lover, they could be your child, they could, like, the list is endless. And this is where I think it's so much deeper. And so often people will have specific like soul animals in their life where they're like, I know you, or there's just something else here and I don't know what it is. And it's really cool to explore that in a deeper way. And often I think as well, when you are so deeply connected with your animal in that way, I guess it's like a romantic relationship where it's almost like you don't want to dive even deeper and explore things even more because you worry about what's going to surface or what's going to come up, or like there's just so many emotional threads in there. And the piece that I was mentioning earlier about like connecting with your own animal and how sometimes your ego can get in the way, I think this is where people can doubt their communication abilities because they're wondering like, oh, I'm just making this up, or oh, like they showed me this the other day or whatever. And this is where it can be really helpful being in an environment where you get to practice with other animals and have your messages validated and have that coming through, or work alongside an animal communicator and both connect with your animals so that then you're like, oh, okay, I'm not making this up. Because it can feel a lot of the times like you are making it up. And I think when you are so deeply connected with an animal, there's always often this energetic thread between the two of you. So the connection that you have is so innate. It's happening all of the time. And it's not as obvious as the separation you would feel as if I was intentionally connecting with your dog, Celeste. Oh my God, why is my brain doing this way? Like I'm actually just
in Australia.
No, I don't think it's that. I think it's just my body's like, I feel like my cells are like transitioning with this move, you know, like everything's like upgrading. I'm like chinking into place.
Well, something you had spoke to this at the beginning, but we haven't shared, but you literally manifested your dream property. And when we first met, you hadn't been engaged, but you recently got engaged, like, you know, within the last year. So we're just out here manifesting. So we'll have to, I still have another question or two before we close out.
Yes.
But we'll have to like share what you want to manifest since you're a manifesting queen. But yeah, it's also, it's just a like reminder that the areas within spirituality are so vast, and the rabbit hole does not end, my friends. It just gets deeper
No.
and fucking deeper. So yeah, so I'm like, yeah. You think you know, but you really don't. So, okay, one question, second to last. What are some tips for people who want to develop their own intuition with animals and animal communications? What would you suggest?
So I think it depends on where you're at. If you're somebody that feels quite calm about the process and quite open, I would just invite you to spend some time around your animal in a meditative state and just ask them questions. And really set the intention before you receive the messages to act as a clear channel, to allow yourself to view the messages with an open mind, an open heart, a lens of curiosity, and trust whatever messages do or don't come through. And also like own the fact that it is going to be from them. So that then you're in this practice of like, okay, I'm writing it down and I'm choosing to believe that this is from them. And then you can receive those messages and then live your life based on what the messages are showing you, or perhaps do the opposite, do whatever, but just notice what's validated, what's perhaps invalidated, like feel into it and you'll know. So that's one option. Now, if you're feeling really hesitant, because a lot of people might avoid doing that because they're worried about what their animal is going to say. Often I'll have clients, and I've even experienced this in the past, where I'm like, oh my God, what if they hate me? Like, what if they come through and they're like, oh my God, I don't like this, this, and this, and this, and I can't do anything about it. Oh my God. So if that's the case, I would work with an animal communicator, or I would dive deeper into finding the opportunity to be supported to develop your intuitive gifts and be held through that experience. Because often what I'll find with clients is they're already connecting really deeply with their animals, but they have perhaps a lot of anxiety coming to the surface. A lot of them are very clairsentient and they feel so much in their body. And even just going through the process of energetically cleansing and coming back into their own energetic field feels extremely overwhelming for them because they're very highly sensitive. So really being guided and like supported through that process is really, really beautiful. And then that's going to help you be able to open up your channel to connect with the animals even more clearly, just like any other intuitive work. So I think it just depends on where you're at. Just give yourself what you need. But yeah, I think get into a meditative state, set the intention. You can call them forward in nature if you want to do that as well, and go from there.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And as you were speaking, I was just like, oh my gosh, there's like these, I don't know if they do this in Australia, but in the States, what they'll do is like, they'll show like these commercials of like animals that are in need or have been like abandoned, just like been treated in the most inhumane way. I can cry on command just like watching that because of my cancer ass. It just gets so sensitive and I can't do it. I literally have to walk away. Right. And it's so true because it's like a reflection of, the states that they're in. And then when you just nurture them and you show them love and like, you see the reflection that they really do have a soul and like they are their own form of consciousness and they're here. I was talking to my best friend. She has 2 dogs and she was speaking to, I think she was having a conversation with her mom like a long time ago. This was like over a decade at this point. And she was saying like, they're not here to like enhance our lives. We're here to enhance theirs because they're not here for as long as we are. And I was like, that is actually such a profound thought because they give so much. Like you could literally beat them and they would still love you. And that's just so wrong if you think about it, but it's the truth because that's how like, giving that the animals just innately are. So my final question, so for me, animal communication, at least in my intuitive practice, has just come up. It's mostly with grief. It hasn't, this is what I wanted to add to the comment that you had just shared, where you can connect with your animal at any point. Like they don't have to necessarily be crossed over. But for me, it shows up in my practice with them having crossed over and it's related to grief. So how can animal communication be used to help with grief after losing a pet? And what are your final thoughts on animal communication and how can people work with you? 3 questions in one, sorry.
So in terms of animal communication and grief and supporting you through that transition, I think it can be so, so, so beautiful because it can bring you a lot of grounding and solace through that time. Because I think often, especially if their passing was really traumatic or really not the ideal, right? Not the ideal in our minds, where they just go to sleep and they're old and it is what it is. And even then, that's still really, really fucking hard. I think going through a communication process or working with a practitioner to support you and receiving messages to help you bring resolution to your experience can be so beautiful, because so often there's so much guilt and blame and all of this that comes to the surface. But animals don't view death like we would think that they would. Like, it's very much divine. It's very much a part of the process. It's all there to support you. And I think when we really look at things in the physical and the non-physical way, like, who's to say, like, they're probably supporting you even more in the non-physical to help you through your process. You know, they're really, and I think when you look at every interaction in terms of them being your guides, like, they're helping you through this process, even if it's hard. And I've been really thinking about conscious language and how I use my words. And this reel came up as well on Instagram, and is his name Bashar? Have you seen him? Where he channels, I'll send a reel. I can't remember if that's his, like, complete the name, because I've just seen him pop up and I'll listen to the reels where he's channeling. And I can't remember if it was a man or a woman, but they said, "Oh, I've lost my mum." And he goes, "Oh, where did they go?" like it feels probably kind of brutal when you're in the midst of grieving. But he was just like, but they're not gone. Like, you saying that they're lost, or you're kind of invalidating the fact that they're not, like, that they're here, you know, like, where they are here and they are there to support you. It's just in a different way. So I think as well with our animals transitioning, it can feel like, especially in that deep grief state, oh my God, they're gone. And it's like, they're gone in the physical form, but they're still here in the energetic form. And really opening yourself up to connect with them that way, I think, is so, so, so healing. And if anybody's worried about the messages they receive from an animal that's passed, this is where working with the right practitioner is really, really supportive, because they're never going to share anything that's going to be like, oh my God, you fucked up when I passed, or whatever the ego stories are in your head. Like, it's just not the case. So I think that can be really supportive in terms of navigating grief and moving through that transition phase. What was the next question?
Final thoughts. Where can people work or find you, and how can they work with you? And then we'll just close out the show with as we usually do.
So you can find me at Felicity Davies with an underscore at the end on Instagram. I'm Felicity Davies Horsemanship on Facebook. My website's felicitydavies.com.au. I've got the Equestrian Perspective podcast. Even if you're not horsey, you'll probably find a lot of the episodes really, really interesting. Just scroll through and pick a topic. And like I was saying earlier, even if you don't have horses, you can sub out horses for business or child or partner or whatever. Like, a lot of the themes relate, especially when we're looking at things in a deeper way. And my offerings are ever changing at the moment. So just go to my website, find more about me. If you don't have horses, but you feel a really strong connection to work with me and you want to dive deeper, just send me a message and we can feel into if it's the right fit, or I could refer you to someone else.
Yeah. Also, we didn't talk about your book, but what is your book that you're dropping?
Oh, so I put the author in on my bio because I authored my Oracle guidebook, and I plan on writing a book. I've started, but I've been doing this for a long time. Oh my God, creating something like that, you have to sit with a lot of feelings.
Right.
Right. So I like to speak things into existence. So I just decided to claim that on my bio.
I love that. I love you. You truly live the archetype of a Manny Gen out to the T. And I love it, because I love your big three. I love your chart. I've read for you, your horse, your business, and I love everything you're doing. And truly, like, your podcast has so many just like nuggets, and you talk about like everything. And I know, like, the overall umbrella is focused on horses, but there's so much there. So guys, please check it out. Manifesting really quick. What do you want to call in?
What am I calling in? At the moment, I'm really being intentional with this move. Calling in a really beautiful, smooth transition, really allowing myself to enjoy the space, like really just opening up to receive even more deeply. So that's where I'm at, just really appreciating the magic that's already around me, or being really grateful, like lots of love. So that's the spot I'm in.
Well, I can't wait for you to host retreats on your land in Australia. You'll give us a reason. I'll come visit and
yes, come visit.
Yeah. Nicole, do you have any questions?
What do you think of Cesar Millan?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question.
I haven't watched a lot of his work, but he, from what I have seen, appears to work with dogs in more of that old school hierarchical domination type way, which is very much outdated and not necessary. So I think there are certain like for me, for example, when I started working with horses, it was very much that way of like, you make the horse do things. If the horse doesn't do what you ask them to do, then they're being rude or disrespectful, and you make them do it, and all of this. And then when you learn more about behavior and animals being a sentient being and having their own opinion and personality, and all behavior being feedback, then it's a real rude awakening, because you're like, oh, they're not doing that because they actually don't want to. Why don't they want to do it? Because they don't like it. Ouch. Right? So, yeah, I think he might be a good stepping stone for people to find the next step. I mean, everyone's got their own role to play, don't they? It's tricky.
We'll talk offline about it, but I had an old coworker. She was not a nice person by any means. She kind of screwed me over as I was leaving my corporate job, but she had worked with him. She actually had won some bonus money on awarded to her by the company, and she worked with him. And now you have me thinking about the energy of that. I was like, interesting. So yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. I think as well with that, it's like, do you want your animals to be in partnership with you where you have a two-way conversation, or do you just want them to be obedient? And I think probably the same conversation can be had with people with kids.
Yeah. Okay, I'll say that. I'll share that comment for thank you so much. Would you mind being so kind as to do our card pool and sharing which deck you're playing
yes,
my friend?
So this is my oracle deck. It's called the Equestrian Oracle.
Love it.
And we'll see what comes through. I got the Give to Receive card. Do you want me to hold it up even longer? I think with the Give to Receive energy, I always like to kind of share it in two ways, in terms of a lot of the people that I work with, they already give so much. It's time to allow themselves to receive. Or perhaps if you're on the opposite end of the spectrum where you're expecting other people to give you what you think you should want, then it's about you give that energy outwardly, and then you create space to open up to receive, but you release the expectation of needing that, because that's just not the vibe. So I think in terms of this episode though, Give to Receive, I guess it probably sums up the spot that I'm in at the moment in terms of what I'm manifesting, and really just being in the space of letting myself receive and feel all of the stuff that's come to fruition and where I'm at. So I don't know.
Because you have done a lot in the last 4 years, and again, we'll have to save that for the business episode, but yeah, that you've done so much, and I'm excited for you, and just to see that being reflected back in the growth, and just even the numbers you've hit. So I'm really excited for you, and I hope to one day visit.
Yes, I would love that. Do you want me to say thank you?
I was waiting for Nicole to jump on. We'll edit that.
Sorry, I was trying to mute. Thank you, Felicity, even though I didn't have much to give. But I received.
You received, exactly. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you for
me.
waking up so early to meet with us.
Yeah, and just for the reschedule and all the things, and we're so happy that you finally came on, and check out the episode that I did with Felicity on her podcast. That was pretty juicy. That was last year that we did it, almost a year ago at this point.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the episode, but if you just search your name and Equestrian Perspective, it'll come up.
Yeah.
Link it.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll link it in the show notes. Well, thank you again. And until next time, thank you.
See you guys.
Cool.
Bye. Bye.